Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be further criticizing Stefan Molyneux. Last time I criticized his criticisms of Ayn Rand's ethics. Today I'm going to criticize his ethics, so-called universally preferable behavior. This video is a short introduction to it. According to him, I only watched the first minute or two while I was making sure my settings were right. So I have not seen this video. After this, I am going to do a video on his criticisms of Ayn Rand's politics, and that's all I have planned for Stefan for now. In case you weren't aware, I recently did a 6.5 hour commentary video with Raka Ali on that same video I did last time, Stefan Molyneux's criticisms of Ayn Rand's ethics. He had some confusions about what I said, so we talked for 6.5 hours over that half hour of video. So that's on Rucka's Reacts channel. You can go look at it there. I also put it in my discussions playlist here, but it's not on my channel as a normal video, so if you want to see that, go over to Rucka Reacts or look in my discussions playlist on my channel. Anyway, today, let's get into Stefan's positive account of ethics, not just his criticisms of Ayn Rand. Let's see what he has to say.
Good morning, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Stefan Molyneux. I hope that you're ready for your daily argument. Today we're going to be talking about ethics, the most important work I think that I've done as a philosopher, and I believe the most important work that can be done in philosophy. We're going to talk about my theory of ethics called universally preferable behavior. It's going to be a very brief introduction. If you want more, and I really hope that you do, then please check out my free book, Universally Preferable Behavior, a rational proof of secular ethics, that is available at freedomainradio.com/free. So, let's dive in, shall we? The question, I guess, is first, why? Why bother with a system of ethics? Well, I guess you really can't help but notice these days that since the fall of Christianity as a central ethos or set of virtues for Western civilization, well, we've been just a little bit lost and adrift, and in some ways I think we're now circling the drain. And so the problem I've had with a lot of atheists and secularists is what they've done is they kind of ripped the roof off the church during the hailstorm of internecine warfare that characterizes most of human history. They tore down the church, drove people out of the church, but gave them no new place to shelter themselves. And so now people are just kind of lost and wandering and scared. They don't have a community. They don't have a central system of belief. And, well, let's just say the West has become pretty damn easy pickings. So whether you can go back and resurrect the Greco-Roman and Christian worldview, I guess that's a possibility. It's not particularly a strong possibility for empirical rational philosophy, so I wanted to work on a system of ethics that would prove virtue, that would prove morality, that would crack the Humean distinction between the ought and the is, like you can't get an...
It's weird of him to put Greek and Roman and Christian ethics as if they're all one and the same. They're all just broadly the same thing. They are not at all. I mean, the Greeks didn't totally work it out, but they were going in the right direction, and Christianity turned everything back to the wrong direction, the direction human beings had been going in before the miracle of ancient Greece. And if there is any such thing as a miracle, and there isn't, I just mean this poetically, ancient Greece is that miracle. A brilliant, unprecedented, rational, selfish, secular society out of the midst of this total swamp of human history. It's miraculous. Not literally, but okay.
an ought from an is. The ought generally has come from divine commandments, or failing that has come from the secular power of the state to punish people who don't conform to legal norms. Neither of those are philosophical fundamentally, so I worked very hard on this. I was very informed by Aristotle's old dictum that says, hey, by all means, work on a system of ethics, more power to you, but if you end up with a system of ethics wherein, rape, theft, assault, and murder, the big four, are somehow good, well, then you've made a wrong turn at Albuquerque somewhere. You've gone in the wrong direction. So I wanted to work with those sort of four cornerstones of ethics: rape, theft, assault, and murder. And if I could find a way to prove that those are wrong, then, hey, we're on the right path. And this is revolutionary stuff. I just wanted to warn you just over the next few minutes. There's an old saying that says, the mind, once stretched by a new idea, never regains its original shape. This is going to be you in just a few minutes. So brace yourself, be aware, and get ready. So the first question is there even such a thing as universally preferable behavior? Fine question. I'm glad that you rhetorically asked that. The question would be this: can you argue against universally preferable behavior without invoking universally preferable behavior? So
All right, so the first thing that is probably obvious to most people watching this is that if you start out with an assumption that certain things are wrong, and then you try to work back to justify that preconceived notion, you're really rationalizing a conclusion you want to be true. By what standard is murder wrong if your reasoning doesn't tell you that? You just have this mystical insight that murder is wrong? Now, you can say, yes, there's something that seems bad about murder, and that's true, and then you should look into it. But this rationalistic idea, well, we already know what our conclusion should be, let's just justify it. That's wrong methodologically. I mean, if it was so obvious that murder was wrong, you would just say, this is not like saying, reason is practical and now we have to work out the mechanics. That's not the same thing at all, because reason is practical, because you see it working. So there's no question of, does reason work? No. It does, and now it's just working out the mechanics. That's not the same thing here, at least not the way Stefan is presenting it. Because he would put the same thing, he would put selfishness in there, he would put all kinds of these are things you just know are wrong. How do you just know they're wrong if you have no justification for that view? Maybe some things you thought were wrong turn out to be right. Some people think killing animals, it's just wrong. It causes them pain, right? I mean, that's an implicit argument right there, but the idea, it's just obvious. Killing animals is wrong. It's just obvious. So you could throw that in there. This is just one of the obvious things that we need to rationalize, and that's really what he's talking about here. He's talking about rationalizing, not reasoning. Because he already has his conclusion. So now let's just justify it. Now, obviously, I'm against murder too, but I know why. There's a reason for it. I didn't just assume that and try to rationalize my commitment to the wrongness of murder. And as long as that's the method you're using, Stefan's method, you will never come to an accurate ethics. Because you're not starting with reality. You're starting with this premise of, well, here's what I have to justify. Just these things I just assume, and now I have to justify them. Well, you're not letting reality lead you to where you need to go. You are trying to get reality to come to you. No, reality is what it is. You have to abide by it. Okay.
Preferable behavior is things that people do that they ought to do, that they should do. That's universal. Doesn't mean they always will do it. It's universally preferable behavior, not universally preferred behavior. So it doesn't mean that people actually will do these things. It just means that they should do these things. Like if you have diabetes, you should follow a certain health regimen and a certain diet. Doesn't mean you will, but the nutritionist can certainly say you should, based upon the facts at your disposal. So universally preferable behavior is not what people do and that they automatically do things. I mean, there would be no science of nutrition if everything we wanted to eat turned out to be fantastically good for us. We have to go against our instincts and learn more about, health and medicine and nutrition in order to eat wisely or how to exercise. Like,
hear those lightning bolts, that thunder. It's God getting angry. Stefan is going against religious ethics.
You want to exercise according to that good old Aristotelian mean. You don't want to exercise so little that you end up as a pear-shaped couch potato, but you don't want to exercise so much that you end up with like shin splints and tendonitis and arthritis in your 50s or something like that. So the question before us is there such a thing as universally preferable behavior? Now, interestingly enough, if you come up to me and you say, as many people have, Steph, you're totally wrong. There's no such thing as universally preferable behavior. What are you actually doing? Well, you're saying, Steph, the statement you're making, that there's such a thing as universally preferable behavior, is false. And truth is infinitely preferable to falsehood, and you should not enact the behavior of saying false things in the world. You see how this works? You cannot oppose universally preferable behavior without invoking universally preferable behavior. You can't say someone is wrong without saying truth is objective. You can't say someone shouldn't say false things without saying that saying true things is infinitely preferable to saying false things. You cannot reject a universal statement without invoking a universal standard. So if people say there's no such thing as universally preferable behavior, they've just invoked universally preferable behavior. They're speaking a truth, they're asking other people to not speak falsehoods and so on. So it doesn't work. There's no possible way around this. People have been...
Okay, this is retarded. First, he's taking this method from Ayn Rand, except he's misapplying it. This is the method of proving that something is an axiom. The denial of the axiom proves the axiom. So you say existence doesn't exist, but you are relying on existence in order to say it. You exist to say it. Your words exist. You can't deny it. Same with identity, same with consciousness, etc. So what Stefan is doing here is just he's applying the method of proving that something is an axiom to the idea that there is such a thing as ought, that there is such a thing as ethics, that there are things you should do. Well, that's true. It is an axiom for ethics, but why do we need ethics at all? Why does the question come up? Yeah, if you're going to talk about ethics, you need such a concept as should. But why do we even need ethics? Why isn't the whole thing just a joke? Why isn't it just itself a mistake? And his view is, well, people come up and they tell you you shouldn't say false things. Okay. Maybe they're just hypocrites. So what? Does hypocrisy prove that you're right? No. That just proves that they're being hypocritical. Yeah, it's true. If they come up and they tell you you shouldn't say false things, yes, they are implicitly endorsing the idea that there are right things and wrong things to do. But so what? You shouldn't say there are right things and wrong things. Yes, that's a contradiction. That doesn't prove that there is something you should do. It just proves they're being contradictory. Again, this is just basic rationalism. This is the kind of mistake you see all over the place, common among objectivists and people who spin off into their own stupid theories on the basis of very little actual understanding of Ayn Rand, which is exactly what Stefan is doing here. Yeah, he thinks he's snatched this method Ayn Rand used to establish axioms, and he thinks that's just so brilliant, and now he's applying it in this way that doesn't actually make sense. The difference between existence as an axiom and morality as an axiom is that existence is actually the base of everything. Right? You can't do anything without depending on existence. Because philosophy is the basis of everything. Metaphysics is the basis of philosophy. It's the beginning of the beginning. So there's no way to get started on anything. Now it's true. Now every branch of study, every field has its own axioms. But you could say the field itself just doesn't matter, or is a mistake in itself. So Stefan is just begging the question here. He's assuming ethics are a legitimate subject. Now, they are, but the idea that people are contradictory in telling you that you should not say that there are ethics, that doesn't prove that there are ethics. That just proves people are being contradictory. And this is why Ayn Rand did not start with this rationalistic nonsense. She started with, okay. She said the first question is, why do we need ethics? Now, I think Stefan said that early on here, but went off the rails into... he never actually addressed why we need it. He just said, well, because things are going down the drain. Okay, I don't know what that means. But Ayn Rand says, no, why do we need ethics in the first place? Why does the question come up? In other words, why is this even a legitimate field? Not people who treat it as a field are contradicting themselves if they tell you that it's not a field. No, but why actually does morality exist? Why does the question of should even come up? And her answer, of course, is that organisms face the alternative of life or death, and it is only the fact that you have to take certain actions in order to continue to exist. It is only that fact that means you should do anything, that means you should pursue values if you want to live. That's it. Ethics come from having alternatives, and the basis of all alternatives is the basis to live or die. The alternative of life or death. So this is I mean, Stefan does this with his arguments against God too. He poses as this, ooh, I'm this extremist. I'm not just God is arbitrary. I say God is impossible. And then his proof is this rationalistic, logical, this idea that God is logically contradictory, with no reference to the law of identity, which makes it just floating. Not the law of identity does, but not referring to the law of identity while discussing why God is impossible, all you're doing is treating logic as this floating abstraction if you're not saying, yeah, but logic comes from reality. So Stefan is highly rationalistic, and you see this in his metaphysics, and you see it in his ethics here.
Been coming at me with this from 6 million different directions for 10 years or so. You can't get past it. It is an absolute. You cannot argue against universally preferable behavior. So given that there's no conceivable way...
Well, you can argue against it. You just can't argue that he shouldn't... you can't argue that he shouldn't claim it. Because then you'd be saying he should do something, but you reject should. But you can still say, no, that's not true. There's no such thing as universally preferable behavior. There's no such thing as should at all. I mean, how is that inconsistent? And even if it were inconsistent, who cares? The fact that somebody's inconsistent doesn't prove that you're right. I mean, this is... You know, this is like... You know, even with axioms, the proof of an axiom, the way you validate an axiom is not actually by showing that it's an axiom. This is his confusion here. No, showing that something is an axiom is not how you show that it's true. You don't know that existence exists because it's a contradiction to say that it doesn't. It's not a contradiction to say that it doesn't because you exist to say that it doesn't. No. You know that it's true self-evidently by observation. You see existence. But proving it's an axiom, which just means a self-evident foundation for an entire field, that you can't even discuss the field without invoking this basic idea, premise, fact. That's different from proving that something is. It's like non-contradiction in epistemology. You can say, oh, well, you don't believe in identity or non-contradiction? Well, your argument that it doesn't exist depends on logic or non-contradiction. Now, that doesn't prove non-contradiction is true or valid. It just proves you can't talk about the field at all without invoking it, which is a completely different thing from saying that it's true. And that's what Stefan does not understand here, which is why I was talking about what he's saying is, all he's saying is, yeah, if there's such a thing as ethics, then yes, there has to be such a thing as ought. Okay, but why is there such a thing as ethics? Same thing with non-contradiction. Yeah, if you're going to say there's such a thing as making arguments, if that's a valid thing at all, then yeah, there has to be non-contradiction. But so what? Well, why does there have to be such a thing as making arguments or rational inference? Well, you know that through observation, not through proving hypocrisy and self-contradiction.
To argue against universally preferable behavior, the only question that remains, and it's a big one, it's a doozy, the only question that remains is, what is universally preferable behavior? It has to be something, because you can't argue against it without invoking it. So the question is, what is it? A great question, another great question. So the answer is as follows. In my brief homage to Canadian comedy, just picture, you have in a room two guys, Bob and Doug. And you give one of them an iPod, you give one of them an iPad. And you say, guys, we're going to run a little experiment here. Let's run the experiment that theft is universally preferable behavior. Stealing, right, the removal of someone's property against their will. Stealing is universally preferable behavior. Now, go to it. What are they going to do? Well, they're going to snatch each other's stuff. One guy's going to grab the iPad, the other one's going to grab the iPod, then they're going to snatch it back, and they're going to continue to do this until you have pity on them and call a stop to the experiment. Now, clearly, if they're grabbing and stealing from each other all the time, doesn't that strike you as like that can't be a rational course of action? That can't be the morally good thing to do. Here's the thing. Physically, I guess you could do it. You could keep snatching stuff back and forth, but you understand it's kind of weird, kind of exhausting, and you can't really do anything else. Because here's the thing. If you say X is the good, then the opposite of X must be the bad, right? If this is north, the opposite of north must be south. So if you say that the act of stealing is good, then not stealing, right? If you say violating people's property rights must be the good, then respecting people's property rights, i.e. not stealing, must be the bad. Now, if you are napping, you can't be evil. I mean, I go more into why.
I just want to point out here that even the universal aspect of this is completely wrong. Why is that? Why is this idea that somebody tells you you shouldn't say there's such a thing as universally preferable behavior? Okay, that's a contradiction about there being such a thing as ought. That's not a contradiction of, again, even in this derivative rationalistic sense where he's not proving anything, but that if you're going to have this field of ethics, then you have to assume there's such a thing as values, as or ought and should. But why does that have to be universal? The fact that somebody tells you shouldn't do something, that's not necessarily universal. Maybe it's something that just applies to the two of you. Maybe it's something that just applies to you and he's just being an idiot and telling you what you should do, and that happens to be true even though it doesn't apply to him. Why is this universal? Stefan, he thinks he has proven a hell of a lot more than he has here. All he has proven is that if you tell somebody you shouldn't talk about shoulds, that's a contradiction. Wow, brilliant, Stefan.
In the free book, freedomainradio.com/free. But if you're having a nap, you can't be evil. Parents always say this, kids maybe being a bit of a terror during the day and then they nap and it's like, oh, he looks like such an angel when he naps. So you can't be evil when you're sleeping. You can't be evil when you're in a coma. And so if you prescribe positive action, you must do X, not you should refrain from doing X. Because when you're sleeping, you can be not stealing, right? When you're stealing, you can be not murdering, you can be not assaulting people. And so if you have a positive action as your moral ideal, then when people aren't performing that moral action, they're not being good. So when is the actual act of theft taking place, right? So Bob grabs Doug's iPad. Okay, he's got it. So in the moment that he transferred it, he's good. And then it vanishes because he's holding on to it. Oh no, he's holding on to it. What happens now? Someone's got to steal from him, or he's, like, you understand it. It's a moment that you can be good. Whereas if you have respect for property rights, you can be good at a continual basis until you actually go and steal something, and then you're bad for that moment, right? And then that badness follows you in terms of reparations. So prescribing a positive action as a moral good is significantly problematic.
Oh,
so here's the challenge.
This is it. This is way worse than I thought it was going to be. This is actually okay. I mean, do I have to explain this? I kind of wish I had a chat up here just to see if there was anybody who actually needed me to explain what's wrong with this. I'm speechless. So the problem with theft morally is that it is a prescription to do something positive. And if you're doing something positive, you can only be moral while you're doing it. Whereas ethics is all about what you shouldn't do, because then you can be moral until you do something which is negative. Or until you do something positively. So you can be moral more of the time, most of the time, because morality is about not doing things, is the idea here. I mean, that is just... I don't know, I think this video is actually useless now, because, sometimes I watch videos and I think, okay, this is a good backboard against which to explain the right view, but this is so wrong and confusing that I actually don't think it's valuable as a backboard. It's easier just to explain this from scratch than to... I mean, all I can say to that is that that's... Again, I just have to go back to the foundations. No. Morality is about pursuing values. It's about taking positive actions. You should always be taking positive actions. This is why Ayn Rand is so unique, because her conception is, Ayn Rand said the noblest thing you've ever done is grasp that 2 + 2 = 4. All of these quotidian things you do every day, those are moral acts. Morality is not just when you refrain from murdering somebody for $1 million. Some billionaire offers you this tempting thing. Oh, I refrain from doing it, so I'm moral. I'm refraining from doing bad things, so I'm moral. No. Morality is about taking all those actions your life requires daily. It is moral to get up and go to work. It is a moral, heroic act to plan out your diet and stick to it. But Stefan seems to think that, no, morality can't be about doing positive things, because then you're only moral for the moment, and there aren't, presumably thinks there aren't enough positive actions that qualify as moral for an ethics of positive action to be substantial. Because, I mean, how many moral things are there to do? Save the world by beating up the killing Hitler or something? I mean, there are just so few positive moral things, I guess you would say, that ethics really has to be about not doing bad things, because you can do that all the time.
Physically, it's very, very difficult to enact thou shalt steal. Stealing is it. But here's an even better part. It is actually, my friends, impossible to achieve. Not just physically. It's impossible to achieve. Let me tell you why. So let's say I have some rusty old garbage bucket of a lawnmower, and I'm like, man, I don't want to trip over this thing. I'm inept mechanically, which I kind of am. And so I just, someone should take this thing away from me. All right. So what I do is I wheel it in its squeaky way up to the sidewalk, and I put a big sign on it saying free, or take me, or I'm yours, or whatever, right? And then you come along in a pickup truck, and you are mechanically inclined. I can fix this. Up you, and you drive off, right? Let's say I captured this on video. I got security cameras. And then I call up the cops and I say, someone just stole my lawnmower, right? Now, if they come and investigate, and the guy's going to say, well, here's the it's free sign. I saw it on the sidewalk. And they say, is this true? And I say, well, yeah, I put it on the sidewalk free, and the guy took it. And it's like, then that's not theft. You're inviting him to take it. It's like, but he took my property. Yes, but not against your will, because you clearly signaled that you didn't want the property anymore. It was open for anyone else to take. So theft can't occur if I want someone to steal from me. If I want someone to take my property, it's not theft. Stealing is not stealing if I want you to take the property, right? So, I mean, just to labor the point, right? You go to garage sales sometimes, I'm sure, and you see, okay, here's a box of free stuff, just free.
Okay, I see what he's getting at, although that's a bizarre, confusing way to explain it. It's much better to use the example of lying. And by the way, what he's saying here is ripped straight out of Kant. This is Kant's idea. Kant's idea is something like the golden rule is legitimate. You have to have a universal basis, something that everybody can do. Not just, I'm going to do this because I prefer that's how other people treat me in this golden rule kind of way, but it's actually not possible. So lying, right? Because he goes, well, you shouldn't lie. Because if you lie, you imply everybody else should be okay with lying. But if everybody lies, then there's no such thing as lying, because everybody knows everybody else is lying. And so that's what he's trying to get across with this stealing idea. That if everybody endorses stealing, then there's really no such thing as stealing, because everybody's doing it. So this is straight out of Kant, and again, this is just intrinsicist, mystical. This is a bad foundation. Ethics is not about. You don't start ethics with, how does this work for the whole group or anything. You start ethics with, what benefits me? And then as a result of that, as a consequence of that, you can't violate the rights of other organisms that fall within your general category because of the consequences of that. But that's a result of the fact of your requirements as an organism, not because it's this mystical standard of coherence that comes just because, hey, you have to be coherent for its own sake, or for something to even make sense, was Kant's view, really. I give Kant more credit for this idea than I give Stefan, because he was saying, well, we have to see if something's actually possible at all. And you can't endorse lying because that's not even possible to endorse as a principle. Anyway.
You have to pay it, right? So you can't steal from someone who wants you to take their property. Now, if theft is universally preferable behavior, then Bob wants Doug to take his stuff, and Doug wants Bob to take his stuff. You understand? But because theft is universally preferable, I should want to steal and be stolen from. But if I want to be stolen from, I can't be stolen from. It's not theft if I want someone to take. So theft cannot be universally preferable behavior. Now think of assault.
Okay, but where does this universal premise come in? Again, this is just his argument from earlier that doesn't actually make any sense. He smuggles in universal in a totally invalid way. Somebody could say, oh, well, I want to steal from you, but I don't want you to steal from me, and so I'll lie and cheat and steal, but I'll lie about stealing, etc. I'm not endorsing that I want other people to steal from me. I just want to steal from them and get away with it. Yeah, that's not universal. So, I mean, I'm not universal in general. You know, I don't want to die, but I kill animals to eat them. It's not universal. So what accounts for that? Why is that not wrong? So, I mean, this is a giant mess.
Think of assault. Now, there are situations where I'm going to voluntarily go into an environment knowing I'm going to get hit. I'm not just talking about like wearing a MAGA hat on a leftist campus. I'm talking about like if I go into a boxing ring. If I go into a boxing ring, I'm going to crack and be cracked and punch and be punched. I don't get to call up the cops and say, hey man, someone just assaulted me. It's like, where are you? I'm in a boxing ring. Then hang up. We got busy things to do. So this can even happen like in sports, right? You're playing street hockey. You get a hockey stick to the face. Oh, someone just assaulted me. What were you doing? Playing street hockey. It's like, hey man, that could happen, right? Where you go after someone in a mall and you crack them in the face with a hockey stick. Well, that's assault, right? So if you're in a situation where you're either allowing yourself to be hit or accepting the risks of being hit, it can't be assault. It can't be assault if it's voluntary. So it's the same thing with Bob and Doug in the room. Okay, you say to them, okay, enact assault is universally preferable behavior. Well, they're just clawing at each other and beating each other up. But because it's universally preferable behavior, you want to hit and you want to be hit. Because you can't be asymmetrical, right? You can't say it's universal, but each person needs to have opposite desires. One person wants to retain his property, the other person wants to steal it. One person wants property rights, the other person wants to violate property rights. It's no longer universal. You understand? It has to be universal for it to be ethical, or to be philosophical for that matter. Otherwise, it's personal taste or culture or whatever, right?
Why? Why can't something just be objectively good for you, but not for other people? Again, he's smuggling in this. I mean, this is mysticism. He's just smuggling in this universality requirement through this bizarre misapplication of the method of proving axioms, which, again, all it proves is the hypocrisy of saying you shouldn't talk about morality. That's not, even on the level of hypocrisy, it doesn't prove universality. So this is a farce.
So, as far as assault goes, I guess they could keep pounding on each other, but because they want to hit and be hit, it's no longer assault. Assault is when you don't want to be hit. Rape is when you don't want to have sexual activity performed on you. So this works all along the line. Rape, theft, assault, murder. Not only is it almost impossible to enact them physically on a continual basis, not only does it mean that people who are sleeping are immoral, but it actually destroys the definition of rape, theft, assault, and murder for them to be universally preferable behaviors. This is how we know for sure, 150%, no doubt, no hesitations, rape, theft, assault, and murder cannot be virtuous, cannot be good in any way, shape, or form.
That is a totally illogical inference. The syllogism here is virtuous things must be consistent across the entire human species. Rape, theft, and murder are not things that you can advocate. That aren't possible, are not things that are possible for every member of the human species to engage in. Therefore, they are not ethical. But again, the premise here is wrong. You got this out of this bizarre, you just plucked it out of nowhere, out of this horrible mangling of an idea, a method you stole from Ayn Rand. Why? Why does universality come into it? And why universality? Why does that only apply to human beings? And where do you draw the line? Again, why not animals? We treat animals different from human beings. Why all human beings? And human beings are all different. Each human being is different. So why is this universal? Why doesn't this just apply to you? Where does the universality come from? How does it apply? Again, there are answers to these questions. I'm not saying that there aren't answers to these questions, of course. If you know Ayn Rand and you know that I subscribe to her philosophy. But I'm saying Stefan is not addressing these issues at all.
See, that wasn't that hard, was it? It's funny, because ethics, there's lots of complicated systems of ethics, but the problem is we really need to be able to explain ethics to like a 2 or 3 year old. And I went through all this stuff with my daughter using figurines and stuff. I went through all this stuff with my daughter when she was 2.5. She got it, no problem. She's a pretty smart cookie, of course, but it's relatively easy to explain. And I've actually got a podcast called The ABCs of UPB about how to explain this stuff to kids. So we need an ethical system that kids can understand because we don't want them to hit and punch and steal and right. So it's actually pretty simple, right? I mean, there's a click moment where it takes a little moment to get it, but once you get it, you've got it, and you won't ever unget it, right? Now without the guns of the state being pointed at you, without theological commandments, why respecting persons and property are good, and why doing the opposite is bad. Now, there will be people who will rape and steal and murder and assault. That will still happen. But here's the problem. The problem, wasp. Well, 2 wasps, I guess. The problem is that it's not individual criminals who are the problem in society. It is not the thief at night. It's not the mugger. It's not the person who's going to assault you. Because you can take reasonable steps to avoid those things. The problem is not individual bad actors. The problem is moral theories that justify either rape or theft or assault or murder. And there are lots of those in the world, all over the place. And you can defend yourself against individual criminals, but those who are pursuing bad ethical theories through the power of the state, through the power of various kinds of compulsion, those people are where the real risk is in society. So there will be individual bad actors. UPB is not going to make everyone good, but it is going to do a full frontal D-Day style assault on irrational, anti-rational, anti-human ethical theories, and that's where the real danger to us and our future lies. So I hope that you will check out the book, freedomainradio.com/free. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Stefan Molyneux. Use our affiliate link if you have some shopping to do at fdrurl.com/Amazon. And don't forget to join our brand spanking new mailing list. New book coming out August 2017, The Art of the Argument. You'll love it. It's great. Have yourself a wonderful day, everyone.
Okay, so this idea of universally preferable behavior can be summed up very simply. It is pure Kantianism. It's the Kantian idea that ethics have to be universal, and there are all these things that are actually literally impossible to implement universally, like lying or theft. Okay, so his actual argument, once he gets the premises out of the way, just ripped straight from Kant. So this is not original at all. That's just Kant. And then the baseline is, or the other component here is, how do you get this premise that ethics has to be universal? Well, because it's a contradiction to tell somebody that he shouldn't say that, because then you're relying on the idea that there is such a thing as a universal moral code. which is fallacious in multiple ways, as I described. So you have this multifaceted, fallacious starting point to get to why universality is required, and then it's just, oh, well, we'll just take Kant and say what Kant said about universality in ethics. That's it. That's his whole idea. So, just logical errors all over the place, and it's not original. The second component is pure Kant, and the first component is a misapplication of Ayn Rand's methodology. Brilliant. So that's Stefan's ethics. So much for that. Next, I will do his criticisms of Ayn Rand's criticisms of anarchy. So I will criticize Stefan Molyneux's criticisms of Ayn Rand's criticisms of anarchy. That is what will come up next. And I also have planned to do a Jordan Peterson video soon. So look forward to that. All right, bye.